Hello guys, La.rc.doc again. We're going to finish up our little motor install here. As I forgot to mention before, we left on the first one. I thought I was running out of time. But okay, finishing up, no big problem at all. Throttle linkage. Be careful when you go to clip that back on. Clip it on as straight as possible. So, and put your thumb pressure at the very top of the ball end so you don't bust it. Make sure that your carburetor is straight and lined up with the linkage. You know, you can do that by loosening up the bolt on, or the screw, or the Allen, whatever the motor takes. Loosening that up and turning the carburetor. Now on some of these you might have to take the carburetor off by loosening the bolt pretty good. Take it out, spin it around and sink it back in, due to the fact that the linkage is in a different location. Now we got everything else put on. Now it comes, you know, the most important part. Most important part is aligning. This one's a 2-speed, so it's got 2 gears. It's a little bit more difficult than a single speed, because you've got 2 gears to get lined up with. What I do is I take me a piece of paper and I tear it just wide enough for both gears to get a bite on it, like, you know, like such. And what I do is I stick them right down inside. This one's a little bit too wide. So stick it right down inside there where the clutch bell and the spur meet, and then roll it in there to where they are going to catch up with one another. As you can tell, the only reason to do this is it keeps you from running them too tight or too loose. So now, since we got it down in there, what I usually do is I'll get me a little screwdriver. Well, this one's actually a long screwdriver, and I'll tap that motor gently over to the gears, and then I'll make sure that the motor is lined up straight. You got to have the motor lined up straight. If you don't have this motor lined up straight, it'll bevel the gears while you're running it, and it'll chew your gears up. So that's the most important thing. Make sure that thing is straight, and flip it up on its side. Hold pressure against it the best that you can. Get the right Allen that fits the. Well, first of all, make sure that everything is against the motor like it's supposed to be. Get everything as straight as you possibly can, and then just snug going in. I go in a crisscross pattern, starting with the front one first. And then I take one Allen that normally just fits it.
Sophie Lane.
Wait. Snug it down a little bit more. And flip it back over. Run the paper back out. See how you're doing? Look at that. Nice and smooth. Let me get this table back out. See that? Them gears are nice and smooth. Rolls back and forth, nice and easy. Then what you need to do to check it, to make sure it's correct, your little screwdriver, little flat one does the trick. Hold your belt hold your clutch belt still by inserting it into the gears. Now take each gear, take your primary gear, which is your first gear, see if you got any kind of movement whatsoever. As you can see my finger, very carefully, I got very teeny little bit of movement, which is perfect. Now go down to your secondary, which is your second gear, do the same thing. You see my finger? It moves back and forth just the same. And what that does, it makes sure that your gears are lined up good, and that when you're giving this baby this 3.6 horse on down the street or on down the track, it's not throwing plastic spur gear pieces everywhere. And then when you get into it, all you hear is a ring, then you're done. So this one's pretty well lined up good. Put your fuel lines back on. Make sure that you got a little clip or they're out of the way. Get your air cleaner. Insert it back on. Keep the dust and dirt from going down the carburetor. Works out real good. And then the object of it is, next is to break it in, which will be, which I'm not going to do on video. I did that on 3.0 and it was a long process. I think you guys pretty well know the deal about breaking in engines. Mine, when I break them in, are very important. I use the heat method, whether it's summer, fall, winter, thinner, ginner, beginner, inner, whatever, you know. I use the heat method. And I'll run up to 100 degrees and I'll start it. And on the very first tank, I'll shut it, I'll run it quarter of a tank, shut it off. Quarter of a tank, shut it off. By third quarter of a tank, I'll watch the temperature. If she gets anywhere near 180 to 200 degrees, I shut her off, let her cool off. And as you shut her off, always make sure your piston's at the bottom of the cylinder. That's most important. When motor heats up, metal expands, okay, and makes the parts easier to move, but anyway, they expand. Metal will contract through heat and cold. So as this motor is cooling down, and the reason you want this piston all the way down to the bottom is you want the top of the cylinder to shrink back to its normal size. That's what keeps your pinch and your compression. If you run it up at the top or leave it where it's at, it will cool down to that diameter, and you'll lose. You won't have a motor that'll last maybe 3/4 of a gallon to a gallon, and it'll start flaming out on you. So most all my engines, without talking smack, honestly, I've got several gallons out of. I had an R&B that I had got 20 gallons out of, and it was used from a friend of mine. We broke it in together, and he used it and won 3 races with it, and it was a World 7, and very, very fantastic motor. But as it got more fuel running through it, I used less throttle on it. But we got over 20 gallons of fuel through it. So if you take care of your RC, it'll take care of you. Just remember that, just like a car. So anyway, there you go. She's complete, ready to put the body on, ready to go. Well, besides breaking it in. And I'll be taking a video of this truck and how she performs after it's broke in. And we'll see her in action. Y'all have a good evening. This is the end of installing an engine on XTM 32 5.2 cc, and I hope you learned some good educational points on this. Have a good one. Later.